we have one of the Oakleys that showed up here today. What's your name?
Fred?
This is Fred Oakley. What's your full name?
Fred Marvin Oakley.
Fred Myron. When were you born, Fred?
1930.
1930. So
Yeah.
you're still a young man now.
That's right.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, Fred, you have a mom and dad, of course, and who were they?
Arthur and Blanche Oakley. Arthur was,
and Blanche. Okay.
Yeah.
And who about your grandfather? Who?
H.H. Oakley, Harvey Henderson Oakley,
Harvey Henderson.
brother to Wiley.
Brother to Wiley. Okay. So
Okay.
then your great-great-grandfather was
Henry Coleman.
Henry Coleman.
That was Wiley and Harvey's daddy.
Right. And 10 other children.
And then his father was Leonard Henderson Oakley.
Yes.
He's the first Oakley that came to this area in 1848. Yeah.
And they settled here in the area that became called White Oak Flats.
Well, that was what Gatlinburg was called, White Oak Flats to start with.
Right. Probably
But-
didn't have a name at all at first. It was just a gathering.
Just
the flats.
territory. But Leonard Henderson built this old wooden cabin down at the mouth of Watercress's Branch. Is where I lived for a long time till I was 10 years old. That's hard. I can't remember some of that stuff, but I could be here all day, but I don't want to be.
So, Leonard Henderson.
Yeah.
Now, where do they come from? Was it North Carolina?
North Carolina.
North
Yes.
Carolina.
Yes.
Okay.
I was trying to think of the name of the county they came from, but
Person, I think.
that's one of them.
Yeah,
Yes.
one of 'em.
Person County. It's right next to Virginia.
Okay.
And in fact, Thomas Oakley was before him. He came into Virginia from. They lived in Virginia, then migrated over to North Carolina.
Uh-huh.
And you go back 3 or 4 Oakleys. All were named Thomas for some reason. But the one that was Leonard Henderson's daddy was known as Thomas Burrell Oakley. Burrell.
Okay.
And the other had a middle name. That's what they went by, but they were all first name was Thomas.
Uh-huh. So Leonard Henderson brought his family, and they settled over near Fountain City at first, didn't they?
Well, they came into Fountain City, but they came. You couldn't get through the mountains back then. Here they came in up Johnston City at a place called I forget the name, Sycamore Flats or something. Up there. And they left there and came into Fountain City. And in Fountain City they came on into Gatlinburg. And that's I don't know the time on that, but well,
Before the Civil War.
yes, it was before the Civil War.
Yeah. Now, when was Henry Coleman born? Was he born in Fountain City or after they got to Gatlin?
I know that he lived about a half a mile from here, just across the road down a little ways at what they call Watercress's Branch. It used to be called Oakley Branch, but he lived there till he died in 1920. And I don't know about where he was born, but some of the Leonard Henderson's people were born in Bristol, Tennessee, and a lot of Oakleys live up there. That's descendants of.
Did you ever hear the family say why they moved from North Carolina to this area, to Tennessee?
No.
Just
I never. Have you heard? I've never heard.
no,
it
I
said.
have not heard it either. I just was curious if you
You
had
hear
heard.
a lot of stories about people leaving to get put in jail. They leave to get on a ship and come over here. One member of our family back, I've heard this. They jumped ship and swam ashore on this.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I forgot which one it was. but-
Coming in from Britain or
Yeah.
Ireland or somewhere.
Yeah, it was. I've never understood exactly what. Some say Scotland, some say England, but I don't really know. I think it
Okay.
was Ireland really originally. Some of it.
Yeah.
Who knows? When you go back that far.
So your family, your mom and dad, they lived in what area?
In Gatlinburg, they lived.
In the
Well, in the 30s, they lived right near here, about a mile or so back across the road over there. But they moved to Gatlinburg. My dad hauled apples from Cherokee Orchard to Knoxville on a horse and wagon, and took him 2 days to get there, and sold his apples in 2 days to get back, and he saved his money. and it was hard to find money back then.
I bet.
And he ended up buying a little piece of property in Gatlinburg, which was luck. And he eventually built a one-room cabin on it. We went from a one-room cabin to an 8-room, and then to a 30-something room, and ended up with 104 rooms on 5 stories high. And
What was the name of it?
LeConte View Motel.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's right across from the convention center there.
Okay.
And,
How about that?
Gatlinburg. Yeah.
And this was your father
Yes.
who did that?
Yeah. Yes. Worked hard all his life.
Uh-huh.
Had a 3rd grade education and could read and write and subtract and add better than I ever thought about doing.
Well, if he's going to be a good businessman and run a motel, he'd have to.
Trained himself to, he served on the school board, believe it or not, for 9 years.
Yeah.
That's unusual for a 3rd grade education. And was one of the first 3 city commissioners of Gatlinburg. Helped the city get started.
Mm-hmm.
And that's unusual about. They were going to start a police force, and I remember this. People was coming by, oh, my son, my grandson, all this would be a good policeman. And it confused, they had 3 commissioners, and boy, they were all uptight about who they were going to take.
Mm-hmm.
So finally, Dick Whaley was the mayor at the time. My dad was the 2nd mayor, not the 1st one. He figured something out. He says, well, this is 1945. He says, we've had 2 paratroopers that jumped behind the lines in Germany, and they're both a part of our family here now. So this is, they got up in front of these people and told them, says, we decided to take these two people and put them on the police force that were paratroopers that jumped behind the lines, and they know how to use the gun. We don't have to train them and all that stuff, you know. All those families had all those people that are trying to get their people on the police force, they couldn't say a word.
Mm-hmm.
So Dick Whaley was smart doing that. And that turned out to be Wallace Montgomery and Major Carr, 2 guys.
Mm-hmm.
That they were policemen all till they died, both of them. That way, yeah. Any more lies you want me to tell?
Oh, well, I've heard nothing but truth so far. I want to hear a good lying story. I want to hear something fantastical,
Well,
something worthy of Wiley Oakley.
Well, I can tell you there's an old house on up this way, up over the hill. It was my grandpa called it the house of no nails. Built it without nails, and that's where my father was born, and a bunch of sisters. And he used to tell me in the wintertime, and when it got cold, he couldn't tell, we didn't know where to pull his underwear off and stuff in the cracks or keep it on. Then you go across the hill from that, and that's where Wiley lived.
Uh-huh.
They had a little house there and a little old shed. I remember the little shed. I can show you where it is now, but it's hard to get to.
Is that the one on Panther Branch or the one at Scratch Britches Mountain?
No, Scratch Britches Mountain. Panther Branch is where they moved to after that. Yes.
Okay, so now the cabin you were talking about, is it beyond the Bud Ogle cabin?
Well, it's just, if you're in the Bud Ogle cabin and you start over the hill, right down over the hill is where H.H. Oakley was, and then you go up and over another little hill, and that's where Wiley lived.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a road into it, but it's all grown up. I've been there, but it's all grown up now. You'd have to take a hacksaw with you to get through there now.
Do you have an idea about what year that would be that he had that cabin?
No, I don't know what year it would be, but that's where Wiley first lived when he first got married.
Tell me about that. I haven't heard that.
I just heard that. I don't know, but the funniest one I ever heard about Rebecca was Casey. Casey's Wiley's youngest son.
Right. Still living.
Well, yes, in a nursing home now. Anyway, I was in the TV business, so we were going to put a TV in for Rebecca.
Mm-hmm.
And we had it all set up and had the 6 o'clock news on. This guy was talking, and Casey says, "Mom, come on in here and look at this." And she wouldn't come in there at all. And finally, he figured out what was wrong, and he found her to. She come over to the door and peeped around she wouldn't come out at all. She thought that man could see her.
Oh, the man on TV.
That's something else.
Uh-huh. And about what year was that? Was this after Wiley had passed away?
Yes.
Okay.
That was about 1956, 57, somewhere. I think Wiley died in 55, 54.
54.
I remember Wiley, Wiley couldn't drive a car.
He couldn't?
No, but I worked at a service station there in town, and I'd see him coming occasionally, and I knew what he wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And he was dying with cancer at the time.
Mm-hmm.
and I'd put him in the car and take him up in the park there, and above the park headquarters up toward what we called the Goober Farm back then. It's Chimney Campground now. And I put him out over there, and he wanted to get out there and lay down. He says, come back and get me in about an hour. Well, I was afraid to leave him. So I got in the car and started up like I was leaving, and closed the door. And then I eased it up, opened the door back up, and he hollered, Fred, you can go now, I'll be okay. He knew I was still there.
So he wanted to be in the beautiful Smoky Mountains.
He wanted to go lay down and just listen to everything around him, what he would do.
Yeah.
It's
part of his love of nature and
yes.
the animals and the birds and all.
Yeah. Never drove a car in his life, hiked all over the place.
Yeah,
places.
absolutely.
A lot of those people did back then. They walked to work.
Well, they didn't have cars, a lot of them, so
they would walk from this area.
Now, he owned an automobile, though, but he never drove it.
I don't remember him driving anything.
Old Flanders, he called it.
What?
Old Flanders.
That's I never heard that before.
He bought it, it didn't run, and he and his son tried to fix it, and they never did get anywhere with that car.
I knew some of his sons. So, in fact, I lived with one in Detroit for a while, Orville.
Orville?
Yeah, I got along with Orville real good. He found out I was up there and renting a place. He came and got me, and he says, "You're staying with me." He brought me over and put him.
Excellent.
And with Charles. That's you know who Charles was.
Yes.
Yeah, we lived together there for maybe 6 months, something like that.
All three of you?
No, they lived upstairs.
Well, I mean, all three of you in the same house?
Yes.
In what town?
Detroit, Michigan.
In Detroit?
Yeah.
What was Charles doing up there?
Well, I guess he's just looking for work up there like most of us were,
This is after he'd been in the military?
Yeah, I was in the military at 50. I went in December 1950 and got out in December 1952, and I went up there. No, I'm wrong. I went up there before December 1952, and that I got drafted while I was up there. Yeah. Had to leave.
So have you got a good story about Charles?
Charles, I can tell you about Charles. What I know about Charles is he worked hard, whether you believe it or not.
I believe it.
He was he painted. He was a painter, an excellent painter. But how he learned to paint was when he was in service, when in the World War II. He painted signs for the troops, what direction to go for the trucks and things, out in front of where the troops went. And he painted signs around Gatlinburg there after that for a while.
He carved animals. He could paint some pictures too, I think.
Did he?
Had a little artistic.
I never remember much of that. I just remember him painting a lot of places. He was an excellent painter. He could have been one of these people that paint these famous pictures or not if he'd wanted to. He had that talent to do that. Because he could paint a sign in no time. I mentioned he had to hurry a few times during World War II.
I guess he did.
Yeah.
Well, now, you mentioned this Chimneys Campground, and you called it something else before.
We call it the Goober Farm.
Goober?
Goober.
Goober.
Peanuts. Yeah.
Goober. Peanuts.
Yeah, there was a guy that tried to grow peanuts up there once in that place, so we named it the Goober Farm.
So this is before the park took over?
Yes. Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
I see.
Yes. Yeah, I remember having to get kicked out. I remember when we had to move out of here to Gatlinburg. It was Thanksgiving Day and a little light snow on the ground. And I hated to leave, and of course everybody else did too.
I'll bet.
But I wasn't the only family. They were all of them all over had to get out, And I just wondered if they would. I often thought at times with the things they were doing in this park, if they'd ever give this property back to the people that owned it at one time. Of course, that would never happen.
No, no, not at all.
That's wishful thinking.
It is. I mean,
Yeah.
but in so many ways, it's wonderful that the park did help preserve this property instead of the lumber companies coming and all
we
of it.
wouldn't have had what we had if my daddy hadn't worked like he did and built the motel. We wouldn't have had anything at all. We were lucky, and to acquire the property that he got at the time. Yes.
So you were sort of dependent upon the growing tourist business.
Yes. I only knew Wiley after he moved to Gatlinburg.
Okay.
See, I was little. See. And that was in the early and middle 50s is when I knew Wiley.
I got you.
I didn't know him before then. And I heard the tales, but I just heard him. I didn't.
Right.
But I knew Wiley very well.
I could listen to you for hours, but I don't want you to have to stand so long. Thank you, Fred.
Okay.
I appreciate it.